Hey folks, hope you're doing well. It's Michael with the Reason RX podcast. Back again, we've got a quarter century under our belt, episode 26 today. Hope you're enjoying the show, and want to remind you again, if you find it valuable, if you'd please pass on the information, recommend the podcast to friends, to people who you know who are parents, to teachers, to school administrators, other people who would find it valuable and really get a lot out of these ideas and be able to put them into practice. They can get in touch with us if they want more information. And if you could give some rational reviews in your podcast app, or if you could give some 5-star ratings and all that, we'd appreciate it. And then if you could help donate to the show, make some contributions, that would be great. We'd appreciate that. Help get better sound equipment. Market the show more. Maybe we could get some like shirts or stickers or something like that made. Get a new logo. Get some help with show notes and some things like that Melanie and I can't afford, being the starving artists we are. But that would be a big help, just to you, to us, to the culture, to our students and children. So we'd appreciate that. So let's get started with the show today. We are talking today to Scott McMickle, a teacher and ex-teacher. So this will be an interesting conversation. Scott was a teacher, his experience in it. So we can find out what he liked about teaching, what he didn't, what could be improved, why he got out. If we look at why he got out, we can do things to figure out what will make people stay and what can make education better. But should be an interesting conversation. And of course, today, clearly, we're talking about something education related. Don't need to give as much of prelude to why it's important for education. I think a lot of people will get a teacher has something to do with education, whereas maybe, not everyone, but some folks might not know why sleep's important, or diet, or physical fitness. Some people know that to some extent, but it's good to develop that, give a little more of a prelude and introduction to some guests. But so we got a series of questions for Scott today, and we'll see how many we get to. But anything to add, Melanie?
Well, I want to welcome Scott. Like I said, as a mom, a parent, and a homeschool mom, it's going to be really neat to be able to hear about his expertise and what he's experienced growing up. So I'm just going to let him start and talk to us and probably ask a ton of questions along the way, but we'll give him a chance to give us his background.
Yeah. So what's your
background? Thank you for the warm welcome. I have a history degree from University of North Texas in Denton, and I have a master's degree in educational administration from Concordia, Austin, which, that would be the first thing on my resume. But I taught for 5 years in inner city Dallas. I taught full content elementary. I taught 3.5 years in second. And then they put me into fourth grade to teach writing, to prepare for the writing test that they do in fourth grade. From there, after I finished my master's degree while I was in Dallas, and I learned so much at the time getting that degree that I wanted to continue improving my abilities as a teacher before I went into administration. And so I got a job at a charter school with an IB program. And I went into their primary years program where I taught 6th grade and Spanish. And I eventually introduced their reading specialist position. And I was their first reading specialist and dyslexia specialist. Mm. I've always had a passion for teaching reading once I finally did get into teaching, because I'm dyslexic. And I failed 4th grade, and I've always known how important it is to have a good foundation of reading. And as a 2nd grade teacher, there were 8 sections of 2nd grade and 1st grade, and what they do in the standard school, and everybody remembers this, is at the end of the year, they figure out some way to mix up the classes. So you really have no idea who the fantastic teachers are and who they aren't. So if you kept all the kids together from Miss Nelson's class and they were all reading 2 or 3 grade levels ahead of everybody else, you would know that Miss Nelson's doing something fantastic. But when you mix her students up with everybody else's, you end up getting 2 or 3 from each class section. And sometimes I would end up with several students who didn't really know how to read in 2nd grade, and I got a reputation for getting those kids, up to grade level or beyond. And within 2 years, I was getting the special ed cluster. I don't know if they invented a term for me or not, but between me and another teacher, we got all of the special ed students out of the 8 sections. The idea was that if they put 4 or 6 special ed students in a classroom, then the special ed teacher would have more time to spend with those students in that classroom. Of course, they spent most of their time doing paperwork in order to make sure that the IEP is being met. So I was on my own.
What's that stand for, Scott?
Individual education program.
Oh.
Or basically, if you're in special education includes children who aren't performing on grade level or have some sort of deficiency, low IQ, or something that makes them not be able to perform on grade level normally without help. And special education actually also includes the high IQ students. The GT is actually part of special education. The idea is that the vast majority of students can get what they need from their classroom teacher, and the students who aren't getting what they need a special program, and they're going to get an IEP. I don't know if y'all have heard of John Taylor Gatto, but it was his idea to have an IEP for each one of his students. And he taught middle school mostly. And he said he never achieved it, but his goal was to have an individual education plan for, I think that's what it is, individual education. It's been a few years since I taught, but every special ed student had an IEP. And it was what they had to do and what they had to achieve by certain time periods. And while the IEP is mandated, you get together in these ARD meetings. I forget what that stands for too. Review and dismiss are the last 2. Oh well.
Academic review and dismissal?
Perhaps.
Or we'll look at it. I'll put it in show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Anyway, I forget what it stands for, too.
Where you look at the IEP, you look at what the student has been achieving, and then you come up with a new IEP to show progress. Sadly, because anything that's required, once you start forcing people to do things, oftentimes what ends up being done is not what you intended. So those meetings and the IEPs oftentimes are the goals are so limited that you can't miss them, right? So if you have a 2nd grader who's in special education and he's coming in the 2nd grade and he's not reading, your goals might be like recognize the letters of the alphabet correctly. Well, if you're finished 2nd grade and you're just now learning the alphabet, you're definitely not reading by 3rd grade. But nobody's going to sue you if the parents and the teachers and all the specialists signed off on an IEP that was really weak or not ambitious enough.
I guess that's what they got to do sometimes just to achieve success. You want to show you're succeeding, and if you lower the bar, then it's easier to succeed. Is that the kind of thing you say that often happens?
Yes, that's been my experience at both schools.
Too bad.
But of course, at the charter, we had they had the same special ed teacher throughout, and she made sure the kids got what they needed. She was very helpful. But in Dallas, they had a large number, and they had so much paperwork, that they had to keep up with to document what they were doing, that they didn't really have any time to do anything. And the type of people they would hire would be like, very very left-brained, accountant type folks who were really good at paperwork, and because that was the essential job that they had to do. So it was just easier for me. I learned very, very quickly that, I was the one who was responsible for getting these kids as much as I could get them within a year, and I wasn't going to get much help doing it, but that's empowering to some extent, because when the buck stops with you, then you're going to make sure things get done.
Yeah.
And that was my mentality. And I taught a lot of kids to read in that environment. And at the time, they were using a program called Open Court, which was designed by, the kindergarten and first grade programs were actually written by Marilyn Yeager Adams, who's a professor at Brown. And she was on the National Reading Panel from 2000 that went through and looked at hundreds of thousands of studies and determined that you absolutely have to study phonics, or you have to learn phonics in order to learn how to read, and that has to be part of your program. And if any of the listeners remember the Andrew Bernstein podcast, that still,
and if you don't, then go listen.
He has some startling numbers on the statistics of who can read proficiently.
Yeah.
And the reality is,
and that's a previous podcast, folks. So you can look in our podcast site and see. I forget if it's 20 or 21 or something, but
it's definitely something you should listen to get an idea of the situation we are in. And the reality is that the teachers' colleges don't teach phonics. They're still into whole languages. And this is, almost 20 years after a devastating report from the National Reading Council. Anyway, when I was in Dallas, they were teaching phonics, and they were really going all in on it. And that's hopefully going to be having positive results. But the problem in Dallas is that they would buy a new program every 4 or 5 years, and they would evaluate their high schoolers, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you're teaching an elementary program and then you test it 4 years later for kids who never experienced it, you're not going to have any idea whether it's working or not when you adopt a new program.
Yeah.
But I really liked her program, and I actually learned a lot of phonics. I improved my skills because I am dyslexic, and I've been the idea that we have 26 letters with 40 some odd sounds, depending on how you spell it, or sometimes you just have to read a word 2 or 3 different ways to figure out how to read it.
And let me
it's a confusing language.
Before we get into phonics a little more, let me throw in, while we're kind of on the context, just a little bit in people's minds in terms of measuring things and measuring a program instead of just throwing one in. Something people ought to consider is an idea brought up in the book Range. Again, we mentioned Range by David Epstein, subtitled "Why Generalists Succeed in a Specialized World." He talks about some people in there who studied some math teachers. I'm not sure. I don't recall to what extent the concretes were that they used to draw their conclusion. If it was just some students at one university or whatever, but it was just in math. Maybe it was at more universities. But most of the times people unfortunately look at maybe student evaluations of a teacher for their own students. I think that's good enough. But some people had the idea that, no, we got to look beyond that. Because, I mean, people know how some of those are biased and thrown off by whether you'll kind of, quote unquote, like the teacher or hate them. And you're not really looking at if they're an accurate measure of the teacher's teaching ability. So they found out that, sensibly enough, that, okay, yeah, there's people who can't teach and do a crappy job. Okay, gone. But some people who got really positive raving reviews, oh, I love the teacher, they made everything so easy, I got great grades, they were not good teachers. It's the ones that were good teachers whose students struggled. They were the ones that, when you look at better measures, their students did better. So what these people did was look at not how the students did in those teachers' classes, but how they did in later mathematics. That's a sensible thing to do. If this is a foundation for later math, well, how does this foundation help? Does it or not? The people who, like most of the people who got, the teachers who got raving reviews, oh, I got such a good grade, he made everything so easy, they did not do so well in later courses. But the people who had a good teacher, but who struggled some, so they had to overcome challenges, they internalized the material more, no telling what else was going on, but those teachers who really explained and who had the kids work, those kids did a lot better in later math courses where it really matters. What matters is outside of the course. So if some of these things could be evaluated more like that, if we'd have some metrics and we start thinking about the broader context or what happens in the future, then that's another thing that'll help get more quality programs.
Well, it's not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah.
Because they've tried to solve it with standardized testing, because you're thinking, hey, if everybody's following the same metric, we'll just judge the schools according to the metric that we're using, and we'll know who's doing well and who's doing poorly. But the implementation hasn't been effective. So in Montessori, you're going to have the children have pretty much the same teacher, or at least be in the same class for the first, for the same 3 years. And if that child doesn't know how to read after they've been in the Montessori program for 3 years, well, you know who's responsible. But in the standard system, you have a different teacher for kinder, a different teacher for first, a different teacher for second, and a different teacher for third. And in Texas, you test the children at third grade with the standardized test to see if they're reading appropriately. So you're not able to hold the teachers accountable. Mm-hmm. You're holding the school accountable. And the school really isn't a person. A teacher can quit a school. The principal can go work somewhere else. Once things start coming to light, before you have any idea who is not, or what program isn't working, right? It would be nice if you could test these things with a standardized test that was implemented effectively. And that would give us the information we needed, like in the math program afterwards. But we're not doing that for reading. For me, it's very easy to test a child. There's you can use something called DIBELS, which is a program for fluency and comprehension, where it goes up to like 6th grade, and you can see where a child is. But for the most part, if you just ask someone to look at a word from a science textbook and say, hey, can you sound this out? You can know whether they're proficient at reading or not. Mm-hmm. Because, and phonics should be simple for the vast majority of us if we get a good foundation early enough. But sadly, a lot of reading programs are just a matter of reading to kids, asking them to memorize sight words, which you're trying to skip steps that are essential.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And Scott, to ask you quick, would you say that there's really just a window where it's kind of got to happen in there? Or is it too late then after that? Or what do you think? Is there like that sensitive period, as I guess some people
Yeah, so we all have developmental stages where we're supposed to learn how to crawl, we're supposed to learn how to walk, and we're supposed to learn how to talk. And reading falls into those where it makes it much easier. But, we are all often learning things way past our developmental stages, and we can still develop proficiency. But yeah, you want to make sure that a child has phonemic awareness by at least age 6. Like if you're worried about your child, if they're dyslexic or something, most children should have real strong phonemic awareness around 3 or 4. But you should start being worried if they can't. So, for example, if you say rainbow, right, a child with poor phonemic awareness doesn't hear rain and they don't hear bow. It's all one word, right? So you can ask little simple questions. Hey, how many words are in rainbow? And the vast majority of kids are going to have it right there. And that's a good sign that they're getting ready to learn how to read. Now, if you can hear the 2 words in rainbow, can you rhyme, right? Because kids with real poor phonemic awareness have no idea what rhyming is. In my family, I've got dyslexia from my dad's side. He's dyslexic. He failed 3rd grade. And my wife is severely dyslexic. So we've got all 3 of my kids have had to have some extra help with reading, especially my youngest daughter. But I knew I had to intervene with her. And we spent a year working through a program called Soundations.
Soundations.
Soundations, yes. It's an expensive program that I used as a multisensory teaching approach teacher. And I forget exactly where you can access it. But anyway, it's a phonemic awareness program, and you can find a phonemic awareness program. It takes you through rhyming. It takes you through breaking down compound words. And none of this is written, right? None of this is really, visual. It's almost all auditory, because you're having to train your ears to be able to hear these sounds. Mm-hmm. Like, do bing and zing rhyme? What is a rhyme? And I was working with rhyming with my daughter, and my wife was doing something in the kitchen, and she came over and she, after we got done, she said, "What on earth are you doing? What are you trying to get her to achieve?" Right? And I had to teach her about rhyming. When she was in her 30s, and she could learn how to rhyme. Right? It's not. She missed that developmental stage, but she still learned it.
Interesting.
That's probably not as automatic as my daughter. Now she loves to rhyme, my daughter. But it's something that she could. It's just like you get this look on their face because their brain simply cannot comprehend. Can't process it.
Like, so your wife was in her 30s.
Yeah.
At the time, and what did she think? Like, because of the way her brain processed, what did she think you were doing? She just didn't get it at all, or like what?
Well,
couldn't pick out the rhyme.
So. Okay, so you give somebody a list of words and you say, what do these have in common, right? And it's kind of like a riddle. Well, if you give somebody a riddle and you look at their face initially, there's just a whole lot of confusion, right? And she just literally could not hear the rhymes. Like, well, I don't understand what is different about these 2 words and what is the same. Right? Wow. So you have to explicitly say, well, it has the same ending, but it starts with a different sound. So look, we have bing and we have zing. See? I'm putting b in front of ing, and I'm putting z in front of ing.
That's fascinating.
And so because they end up with the same sound at the end, they rhyme. It's what people call rhyming, and that's how So I remember I had trouble with this too. When I was in 5th grade at the hippie school. I'm sorry, I haven't given the listeners any context. When I was in 4th grade, I failed 4th grade, and my mom looked for somewhere for me to go because I couldn't really read very well, and I wasn't getting what I needed at the local school. So she found this school that was literally called Treetops.
Okay.
Like the apple juice company or something. Some parents had gotten together with an educator named Dr. Christine Kallstrom, and they started a school for their children in like 1969. And they had 26 acres.
Cool.
It was neat, and they started just as kindergarten, first, second, third, and then they would add a year as their kids got older. And by the time I got there, in the mid '80s, it was 26 acres and had three buildings, and they were very far away from each other. So anybody who took the older kids, sometimes they would take a class in the elementary school, or class in the middle school, or class in the upper school, and they would walk on their own without any chaperones, no parents, no teachers, and we were just expected to trust each other. And that didn't always work, but they were very good educational opportunities when we would get a little too late to class or play in the creek before class. I don't remember where I was, but that's the context of where I ended up going. Can you remind me what I was talking about before I
rhyming and dyslexia, and like your wife was dyslexic and you were too.
So when I was there, I was in my 5th grade. 5th and 6th grade were combined class, and my poor language arts teacher asked me to write some poetry, and what I turned into her was it was supposed to rhyme, and I didn't remember this until I started working with kids, teaching them how to rhyme, because it never occurred to me. At some point, I learned how to rhyme, but it was way after my 5th grade class, and my poor teacher didn't know where to start. Right, yeah. Because by the time you get there,
it'd be hard, especially when you don't know the cause. If you think it's psychological or just you or something, if she knew it was like a brain thing, a dyslexic, and had methods to deal with it, it would have been a lot easier.
Well, she was a really great lady, but to give you some context, by the time I failed 4th grade, I was faking vomiting to get out of to go home. My teacher was just absolutely atrocious. When I would go to her desk and ask her for some help, like on the first day, after I did that twice, she basically told me to never, ever come up again, just pay attention to the lesson.
I think everybody can identify with that. A lot of people here.
We should tell the name of the teacher that really shame. I'm kidding.
Yeah. So she would do a lesson on the board.
We're going to have a whole podcast where all we're going to do is say, blah, blah, blah is a bad teacher, blah, blah, blah is evil, blah, blah, blah is a bad teacher, blah, blah, blah is evil. Podcast 27.
I'm not going to name her, but, she would isolate me.
And then no telling why. No telling what she had got going on in her life. She was a bad teacher, but we'd have to see what the cause was, Maybe there was something with her, too.
But she would explain something, and I was a slow developer. I obviously had an auditory processing issue where I didn't necessarily even hear what was said to me necessarily and process it appropriately. If I was at the point where I couldn't hear rhyme, right, what else couldn't I hear, right? When I was listening to these explanations and seeing the stuff on the board, and since I was basically illiterate, she would write stuff on the board and she would explain it, and I would just be really, really clueless. And so I would ask the students sitting next to me what we're doing, and usually they could tell me rather quickly, and quietly we'd whisper. But she wanted me to figure things out for myself, so she would yell at those students and tell them not to help me. And if anybody did help me, because my classmates felt sorry for me. They knew what I knew, which was I was stupid, And this evil teacher was picking on the dumb kid for no reason. And they're like, all right, hey, you're just going to do this, and you're going to fill in that blank, and you draw these words over there. And okay, she's coming. And then maybe I would do a paper or two in a 6-week session, and she had this little filing cabinet. She didn't pick up the papers. We were expected to finish our worksheet and put it in a little filing cabinet. And I would get a quarter of a way done on almost everything. I'd fill out my name and do a couple things, and I could figure out to some extent, but I was really, really slow.
Yeah, I was slow too when I was in school. I can empathize with that. Yeah.
Well, I would run out of time, and so I'd put the paper on my desk thinking, maybe I'll find some time to do it later. And of course, I'm a bit of a procrastinator, so that would never happen. And I couldn't wait to get out to recess. I couldn't wait to go to PE. I couldn't wait to go to lunch. And then after 6 weeks, she would be doing her grade book, and there would be nothing in my file. 3 or 4 sheets maybe. And then she'd come over to my desk, and it would just be crammed full of worksheets, because that's all she did. She'd give 10 or 15 worksheets in a day. And she'd have me stand up next to my desk, and she'd pull out each one, and she'd, what is this, Scott? Scott, what is this? You need to turn this. You didn't even finish it. And, as a, 9-year-old kid, tears would just be streaming down my face because I got this old lady yelling at me. And, I felt badly about it. Yes, I am deficient. I am stupid. I wish I had put those things in, turned them in. I wish I'd finished them. I wish I'd turned them in. And, here everybody realizes I'm stupid, right? Now, the first time that happened, everybody in class was horrified, that someone would yell at the dumb kid that way. But, so I would start throwing up to get out of, to go home because, it was a miserable experience. There was no way I could be successful. And it was just torture. And eventually got to the, after she did that 2 or 3 times, I would just start leaving class myself. Like, what, I don't have to do with it. So she would send me to the principal for not doing my work or something. I'd eventually just take myself to the principal, which was very disconcerting for the principal. So what'd you do this time? I brought myself. I can't stand that old woman. Wait, what? You can't leave class on your own. And she'd freak out that I took myself to the principal. She got used to it after a while though, and she stopped going to look for me. But I developed a rapport with the principal. It was a difficult situation. Anyway, I failed 4th grade, and I went to a hippie school. But I was damaged goods at that point. So when I was in that class with that elementary teacher trying to get me to write a poem with rhymes, she doesn't know if I can't read very well, if I don't know what rhyming is, if I'm just practicing task avoidance. Because for those listeners, task avoidance is when you are using skills to avoid doing things. For example, a task avoidance might be pretending not to hear what someone said, right? So if you say, what? Huh? And you act really confused a whole bunch, eventually people stop asking you to do things. Right? Or a good example of task avoidance.
Throwing up, pretending to throw up.
Yeah, pretending to throw up. I was very, very skilled. And so these poor teachers, they like if you have a writing assignment, right, if you just do it really, really poorly, right, and you do that 3 or 4 times, no matter how much time and attention the teacher puts into you, well, the teacher's just going to go on to other kids at some point, right? And you win.
Then you're free.
You beat
Yay!
That teacher.
Yeah.
That teacher's going to leave you alone for the rest of the year, right?
Yeah.
So task avoidance is, it's a term I learned as a teacher, but I was the best, which helped me with the students because I could figure it out pretty quickly.
You could identify, yeah. I'm sure, yeah.
And I wonder about the teacher too. Sometimes stuff gets passed down, so sometimes people would just attack her out of nowhere, but that can happen with like violence. Sometimes something happens and you're traumatized, and then you do that when you're older, and then you traumatize other people, and then they pass it on. All this epigenetics and all this wiring and hormone and biochemical stuff going on. So could have been something like that involved in making her that way. That's the way she was brought up, and that's the way she was educated, and that's the way she thought it should be done. Instead of people thinking about what other ways can we deal with this issue, and doing that with her when she was growing up, maybe she got yelled at a lot too, and she just.
But when you're 9, you're not thinking about that. You're not empathizing.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the teacher and how we should look at her and think about ways to help the teacher too. If we want to help the students, got to help the teachers. So we got to look at some of that also.
I'm not trying to demonize her, and I understand where she
presenting that.
I really hated her for a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I've moved beyond that. If I focus too much on other people's deficiencies, then I can't improve myself.
Yeah.
But I do understand.
And that's what you got to do.
That was just how things worked back then. Yeah. And she was an older lady. She was a preacher's wife, like a retired preacher's wife, and she was kind of old school mom type. Yeah. She'd get up, she'd do a lesson. She'd while the kids were working on their worksheets, she would grade it, and kids who passed, great. Kids who failed, that's fine too.
Did she hit anybody on the hand with a ruler?
She didn't hit anybody.
She didn't do that one.
But when I was a second grade teacher, when I was teaching, period, I never had time for grading in class.
Yeah.
I mean, what an incredibly wasted opportunity. I mean, if you've got an assignment that the kids are working on, or if they're working on centers or any kind of activity where they don't need your direct supervision, that's when you tutor kids on their deficiencies.
Yeah, if she could have graded them and then got with a kid and gone over what they did wrong right away, that would have been different. But if she's just grading and then not doing any remedial work or teaching, then it's like, let's just say, a waste of time.
And that was pretty standard when I was going to school. But when I was teaching, I couldn't imagine doing that because I did not have. I had the way they assigned the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills was they had a committee get together and decide, okay, what do kids need to learn at each grade? And they basically didn't have any time constraints on what could be done in a day. So it's pretty widely acknowledged that what the essential knowledge and skills would take about 12 hours in class a day. And you have about 6.5 hours. Obviously, if your essentials are taking 12 hours and you only have 6.5 hours, you're missing out on some essentials. And really, you just basically have no idea what people are doing if you're asking them to do too much at once.
Yeah, it makes it just into a failing endeavor. It's going to fail by its very initial, fail by design.
I was going to say that as homeschool mom again here, it's so funny because with homeschooling, honestly, I don't even think about what grade my kids are in or how much they've, learned compared to other kids that day or that year. I mean, I do consider it because we do take some tests to make sure that they're doing well. But we don't move on until they get it because that hierarchy is master. I mean, you need to know this before this is even going to make sense. So for a school teacher to have that, like you said, there's that opportunity and they can't even grab onto it. That's just unfortunate. I mean, and there's how many kids in a class? 20?
24. 20. And Texas is actually pretty well off because we're at 24. Now there's states that are 31 at the limit or, higher. That's the Montessori training that you've got, or the philosophy. The philosophy in standard education is if you teach pretty much the same thing every year, eventually they'll get it. So like you've got 24 kids that you've got on the same track, And you cannot wait for every kid to master a skill before you move on, because, sometimes this kid is like, for me, for example, if you had waited for everybody in the class to learn how to read in first grade before you moved on to other topics, no one would have learned how to read. I just wasn't, I wasn't there, right? I wasn't mature enough, or I wasn't, my phonemic awareness wasn't there. I eventually learned how to read, but if I had been in a Montessori classroom, I would have been working at my own pace, and I would have been advancing as I mastered things, and everybody else in my class would have been doing the same thing, as far as they would have been on totally different levels. They never would have been held back. They never would have been pushed too far ahead. Yeah. But that's just not the system that we have. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, if you have the Montessori perspective, because there's really no reason to move on from something if you haven't mastered it.
Yeah, and like as some people say, with some things, not everything, but with some things, without a concept for it, we're blind to it.
Right. Yeah, you just can't see it.
Yeah.
Which is, it's interesting. It's how the brain works. You'll have a conversation about pink Cadillacs or something. I've never seen a pink Cadillac in my life. And then you drive down the street, over the next month or so, and you see 3, right? Because your brain knew that was a possibility, something it's looking for. Yeah. And, the reality is those pink Cadillacs have been there all along. It's just they didn't register.
Yeah,
your brain wasn't looking for them.
You perceived it, but you didn't experience it or notice it. Yeah.
But let me bring one more thing into this here, Scott. I teach private music lessons, right? It would be unconscionable for me to give a song to a student that they literally cannot figure out, that they literally, it's beyond them, that would just make them feel like, hey, I can't really do this after all. I guess I can't play the piano or whatever. And I'm just thinking that just seems like common sense. Now, yeah, sure, I've had Montessori experience, but where does that happen where that's okay? People are just, if I did that, my students would never play. They just carry that over into the school system. How is that not just sort of a little bit of a common sense approach to teaching our kids? I guess that's
teachers are required for one thing. Teachers are forced to do it. Some want to do differently, but they can't.
Well, I honestly think that the system was designed that way. And since we're all brought up into it, we have a hard time seeing it, how it would function differently. And then
there's the thing to throw in really quickly.
There's a lot
something
of
you probably know about, like
children that we don't question.
There's a fallacy. A lot of people think the educational system is broken. It needs to be fixed. But my school's great. My teachers are awesome. My kid's doing fine. There's that fallacy.
Yeah,
too.
Well, according to the statistics on just reading and math,
90% are above average.
It's just well, the U.S. isn't doing very well, and in my opinion, I don't really think any country is doing well in education when you compare them to the results that homeschooling and Montessori kids are getting. The standard education model isn't competitive, and really, if we moved more towards mastery, and then intervening when kids don't master. So if I had gotten specialized tutoring in first grade when I obviously couldn't learn how to read, or in second grade when I did get an older lady who understood phonics, and she hadn't been retired out yet during the whole language fiasco. I got tutored by her, and that helped out a lot, I'm sure. But there's only so much you're able to get from a teacher down the hall who has her own students to take care of.
Yeah.
And only for a year.
Yeah.
Or who knows how long it was for. She probably only tutored me for 2 or 3 months, knowing how education works, some experience. There just aren't a whole lot of sections of time you can parcel out to do programs like that. I have got to switch. I have got to plug in my my phone here. So I hope we don't have too much echoing. Somehow.
I guess he's going to call us back or something. So, folks, we've lost him. Scott's been sucked into the great void of cyberspace. He's been assimilated. He's been taken over by the Russian mafia or the NSA. Oh, there, he's back. He escaped.
There, I'm back. Now, are you guys hearing each other? Or
yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's no
video
problem.
Okay.
All good.
That's fine.
Sometimes when you don't use headphones, people hear themselves, and it's obnoxious.
Yeah,
we ran out of my battery already.
Huh. So you switched to your phone?
I am on my phone. I don't have a camera on my computer. So I was on my phone the whole time, and I've never really had a very long Skype conversation on it before. It evidently uses the battery.
You got it plugged in?
I've got it plugged in now.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, it really sucks the battery up, like, massively. So, we good again?
Are you guys? Did you guys stop recording or?
No.
Okay, good. Well, I'm ready to go.
We're going and flowing. Okay. So.
Well, what else do you have to ask me? I'm all yours.
Anything else about your background or about yourself you want to discuss?
Well, I think I've mentioned the what I've done professionally, and I've mentioned my childhood. I've also done tutoring for the ACT and SAT. Mm-hmm. But you know, I've got a pretty varied resume as far as education is concerned.
And then, did you want to say anything more about why you became a teacher?
Well, you know, that's an interesting story. When I was given some really terrible advice by my dad when I was picking out a major, because he graduated in the 60s, and back then, if you graduated from college, you were trainable, and so you could work for any corporation, any career you wanted. Was the story he told me. Well, you know, flash forward 30 years, that wasn't necessarily the case. If I wanted to go into business, I needed a business degree. You know, people were more focused on having people already come in with background knowledge in the particular field. Mm-hmm. And so all I could get a job doing was selling cars. Yeah. And I did that for about a year, and I didn't enjoy it at all. Yeah. And my wife found an ad for Dallas ISD. I could make $38,000 a year plus $4,000 bilingual stipend because I spoke Spanish. Huh. And I thought, well, you know what? I bet that's better than selling cars. And I got into it, and I just fell in love with it. Well, you know, teaching a kid how to read who is convinced he's never going to learn it, that's just magical. Yeah. You know, there's nothing like it. You know, you get through all the task avoidance, you get through all the barriers, and then, you know, you make that, you get them to blend that first word, and, you know, and they're shocked. You know, like, oh, I didn't know I could do this. One time, I taught a young special ed student who he's convinced he was never going to read. Just, you know, really happy kid. You know, I don't know why we're working on this, but he was, you know, he never did any task avoidance or anything, but he was just convinced he'd never learn. And in Spanish, it's actually pretty simple. It's a syllabatic language. You know, the phonics are basically follow. There's a few exceptions where you can pronounce things differently for the S sound, for example. But you just do some flashcards and you do ma me mi mo mu and ka ke ki ko ku and la le li lo lu. And after he got to read these cards enough, basically what you do is you just put the cards together and go la mo, right, and ka sa, and before you know it, you're reading, right? Well, I did the final lesson where I taught him to put these things together, and he was just shocked,
Huh.
And then for the next 15 minutes,
Sounds like who is it? The blind girl who was taught to read. They made the movie about her.
Helen Keller.
Yeah, sounds like
Helen
Keller. Sounds like the Helen Keller story when she suddenly had a light bulb moment.
Yeah. Well, so he spent the next 15 minutes running around the room reading things off the wall.
Wow, yeah.
Hey, here's my name.
Huh, wow.
That says Jose.
Cool.
And he was, and that was it, right? And he took off from there.
Nice.
He was never supposed to learn it. And, you do enough things like that, and, you don't want to stop. Helping someone, changing their life to that degree, and it's just it's fantastic.
Yeah, have you written any books, Scott? Have you gone on any lectures around the world? Does anybody care? I respect books and stuff, but you don't have to write a damn book to be worth listening to or have something to say. Look what you did.
Well, I hope nobody fast forwards through this podcast, because I do think I have some valuable some insight.
Yeah.
You did want to talk about me leaving education.
Yeah.
And how we could possibly get people to stay. I do think if we move to a mastery approach, that would help, because people would feel like they're making progress. Like you're actually getting something done. And when you get a new student, so if you're trying to teach literature or geometry, and the student is illiterate, or doesn't know what the different numbers mean, right? How are you supposed to get your job done, right? I mean, the child really, in order for you to be able to do your job, and for the child to be successful, you can't move them on without mastery. So that would be a big help. But the actual reason I left was because I had a row over phonics versus whole language. The administrator I was working for, I had convinced the previous administrator to establish a reading specialist position and a dyslexia specialist position that I took over, and I introduced the dyslexia remediation. I went through and tested the kids and started using the multisensory teaching approach with them. And I was helping the school out a lot. But the new administrator that came in was from Australia, and he was a reading specialist from Australia. And when he was a reading specialist, they used something called the 3 cueing method, which you're supposed to identify words. You can use phonics. That's one of the cues. You use context. So basically it was a method. It was basically whole language, with fancy words, right? Oh, there's 3 cues, because the 3 cueing method, or any kind of whole language method, it can kind of work if you say, okay, there's a zebra on the page, and that word is horse, but I'm going to say zebra, or there's the word is horse, and there's a zebra on the page, and you say zebra. Okay, that's okay. The child's using their context clues. They're reading. Well, they're not, right? I mean, if you see the word that starts with H and you say z, you need to be corrected. Otherwise, you're going to have lifelong problems and confusion. And he told me I needed to get educated on reading instruction. And, I wasn't, I thought it was important enough that, that's just not an area where I'm going to compromise. And so I said, look, I'm going to look into this 3Qing method, and I'm really going to analyze it. And I'm going to let you know what I think, because I'd never heard of it, and I couldn't judge it at the time.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was phonetic. I didn't know. But when I started looking into it, that's when I eventually contacted Marilyn Yeager Adams for some help. And she was a Brown professor, and I sent her an email, and she responded. And
wow, nice.
And she let me gave me some clues on how to do my research and everything. But she gave me the background and the support to know it wasn't just me being obstinate. So I took her information and I did more research on the 3Qing method and whole language versus phonics, and I sent him a whole report analyzing the 3Qing method and giving my opinion on it. And he called me into the office and fired me.
Huh, wow.
And, I had a family business to go to, and I was doing some tutoring. And so I just thought, I need to take a break. I put my heart and soul into this stuff, and I can have some, really, I don't know if you've studied Nathaniel Branden's work on self-esteem.
A little bit.
His book, 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, is excellent. And
who's Nathaniel Branden? You wrote a
Nathaniel
book on
Branden
self-esteem?
He's a psychologist.
Okay.
And he was a kind of a pioneer in self-esteem.
Huh.
And he's written all sorts of books on self-esteem, and that's basically what he did, is he counseled people. Because people who have low self-esteem will do odd things. So, imagine you're an administrator at a school, and you ask a teacher to do some research on a particular subject, and he sends you 5 or 6 pages of annotated results. And this guy, obviously he's motivated, obviously he's interested, and maybe he has a different opinion than you. But if you have a teacher like that, if you have high self-esteem, you're going to say, you know what, I bet that guy does a really good job in class. That guy is obviously motivated. He doesn't get off work and worry about his hobby. That guy he eats, breathes, and sleeps teaching.
Takes ideas seriously, looks to see what he can do better, considers other points of view.
If you have low self-esteem, you're going to find that guy really threatening.
Yeah.
And you're going to try and get rid of him because he wants your job. And so Nathaniel Branden would counsel, executives and things, because people would come to him as a psychologist and they'd complain. They'd say, I've got my dream job, but I cannot make myself do it. Right. And, he'd get them to understand that the problem was they know they don't deserve the job, and so they're trying to get fired, which is how people behave. Right. So you need high self-esteem. You need to know that you deserve what you're getting, so that's one of the problems with complimenting children when they don't believe it, right? So when you're complimenting a child, you need to tell them exactly what they did. Look, you use this your proper alliteration here, or you pronounce this word correctly, or you solved this problem correctly and you did it quickly. Look, you did it much faster than last time. You don't want to say, man, you're brilliant. These are fantastic things, because children are very honest, and humans are very honest. And if you're trying to tell someone something that they don't believe, they're going to do stuff even subconsciously in order to convince you that you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hey, Bob, we couldn't be doing this without you. The next thing you know, Bob is really screwing up, and you have no idea why, right? It's because Bob doesn't think that you really need him.
Yeah.
Right? So he had low self-esteem, and
so we're talking about the guy,
the administrator who fired me.
Yeah, he was your
but
boss.
I was getting, I was really popular with the parents for the most part, and I was really popular with the kids, and I was really popular with the better teachers, and that created some enemies, and also I did criticize
unfortunately.
did criticize the whole language stuff. I mean, I'm an opinionated person, and I don't, I'm not going to hate you because we have a difference of opinion, but and so it doesn't occur to me to keep things close to the chest often enough. But there are plenty of people that will hate you for your difference of opinion and will try and destroy you.
Yeah, try to undercut you socially. Yeah.
So I don't know from my experience how we could keep more teachers in education, but maybe somebody can get something out of that.
Yeah, but yeah, I think Marva Collins suffered from some of that too, from what I learned in reading her biography and autobiography. So she was very successful, and Marva Collins was driven out of the school.
Yeah, well, Jaime Escalante, there's all sorts of people. Jaime Escalante, after Stand and Deliver movie, it was made it was made about the year that he was really successful when he started, right?
And then you don't hear the rest of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they had followed the rest of it, it wouldn't have been a Greek, comedy, where you have a happy ending. It would have been a tragedy.
Yeah.
Because he ended up not being able to stay at the school because nobody else could replicate his results, and so made everybody else feel badly, and so the union and the administration, everybody put pressure on him to leave, and he had to.
Yeah, and then they weren't as successful on the math APs anymore.
Right. Yeah. The movie should have been more like Awakenings. I don't know if you remember the movie with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Where so he's at a mental ward, and he.
Are you saying schools are like mental wards?
Sometimes. No, that's not the analogy I'm using. But in the movie, he has this drug that he's able to assign or to prescribe the folks, and they wake up out of their comas. They can't talk. They start talking, and they start dancing, and they're alive again, right? And he has to give them more and more of the medicine. And they start to get worse again, and eventually it doesn't matter how much medicine he gives them. So the end of the movie is kind of sad, but the middle part of the movie is really neat because you have people who you thought were just they were done, and they had so much life and vitality left to them, and that's kind of the story of those inner city that inner city high school with Jaime Escalante. You had these kids who they could score better than the wealthiest districts on pre-AP calculus. These kids from the barrio. That's the potential that we have with fantastic teachers, and we need to support them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a potential we have, and if it's not there, it's being betrayed or destroyed or undercut. You got backstabbers and stuff like that getting in the way of it. It's not like it's unusual. It should be kind of more like the normal and the expected.
Right. Well, I had, just anecdotally from when I was teaching, maybe 5% of teachers shouldn't have been in the job, which is enough to really be bad for an educational system. I think really just the philosophy and the curriculum need to be modified to allow those people to be successful.
Yeah.
When I left at Dallas ISD, I had a good relationship with the principal, and I said, "Look, I'll give you 3 more years if you let me loop." And looping is when you stay with the same class for 2 years. Like you go, like if you start out at kindergarten, you go into first grade with that same class, and that's enough. That's contrary enough to orthodoxy that he couldn't do it, because I wanted to loop for 3 years.
Yeah,
if you gave me the kids kindergarten, first, and second, I would guarantee that they would pass. If I had a kid from all those ages, I said I guarantee they will all pass the 3rd grade tax test.
And that shows the rigid, dead bureaucracy involved when you can't even do something like that.
Yeah, that would have been a neat experiment, but it's a whole lot easier just to keep things the way they are, because to some extent,
easy in some ways.
That's like
the consequences are not easy,
right?
though. The consequences are really, 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 really bad. But yeah.
Yeah, so you probably have to get a psychologist involved, and write up a study, and then have it put before a board, and because
Yeah.
it's not normal. But that was a big part of my problem is I would get these kids in second grade who had a terrible first grade teacher, and I knew who she was, and I think he eventually got her fired because I documented it for him. But that's really hard to do, is fire a bad teacher. But I knew that if I had the kids early enough, and another problem is when you just have kids for 9 months in elementary school, you don't have any authority after the year's over. Like if you were to loop, like I could send assignments home for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever, and they would get done because I was the teacher, right? Now, if I was in kindergarten and I was going to be the first grade teacher, if those parents didn't have the kids, working on certain stuff during the summer, they probably would have felt like moving because they wouldn't want to come and have to explain to me how they fell down on the job in September of first grade, and I'd get to do that for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having 9 months, I would actually have 30. I would have access to the summer months, and also I would be motivated to check in on the kids in the summer.
Yeah.
Right. Because hey, I made this guarantee, and I am responsible, and if I don't get it done, everybody's going to know. The egg's going to be on my face.
Yeah.
So you just provide a lot more motivation and a lot more accountability for everyone.
For sure. Yeah. Would you think maybe privatizing education? It's kind of sounding almost like there could be special schools that would say like go year round, but do it different or start at a different time of year, and have that looping as an option. I mean,
I think, well, ideally, in an ideal world for me, everybody would do Montessori, it would be. Montessori would be cheaper, ideally. It's such a specialized market now that it's hard to find teachers that are willing to go through that training, and they're not cheap, and the materials aren't cheap.
But it's great stuff. It's worth it.
It absolutely. If you can afford Montessori,
what value do we place on our students and children in the future?
I know it.
That's it.
I know.
Period.
But did they use that, Mike? Sorry to interrupt, Scott. If they use that though to throw more money at what's not working, you know what I mean? So if you say it like, I understand where you're coming from, Michael. But man, if we just fund this a little bit more
computers, right? We just need faster computers, and then the kids are going to be geniuses.
Well, there are just some things. You're starting off with a system that's not really meant to work very effectively. There's really no reason to put a whole bunch of kids the same age into the same room.
Yeah, there's so many too.
It might sound like a reasonable idea, but it just doesn't work at all anthropologically. Humans are niche finders, and if you have 7 or 8 kids who are the same age together, that's about the limit, in my opinion, of what you would have in a tribe where everybody can find a skill that they're known for and they can feel good about. I'm the kid who's really good at finding berries, or I'm the kid who's really good at making arrows. I'm the kid who's really fast, and then once you put it into 24 or 25 or 30 kids in the same classroom, number one, in kindergarten, those kids are pretty much 9 or 12 months apart from each other, because there's a cutoff, and the cutoff is like September. And so you've got kids who are born in September hanging out with kids who were born in August, right? And they're basically a year difference, and they're supposed to be learning the same stuff. And like, and the younger they are, the worse that is. Right? Once they get to high school, it's not as big a deal because developmentally, a year is not. It has evened out a little bit, but but you take all these kids who are the same age, and well, theoretically, right, except for that kindergarten example, but they can't find niches, right? And if you can't find a niche as a human being, it's very, very bad for your self-esteem. I'm not good. I'm not as good at math as the smartest kid in class. I'm bad at math.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that just goes. And even the kid who's really good at math is feeling badly about something. Right. I mean, occasionally you've got that kid who's just the best at everything, and he's usually a year older than the other kids. And he feels good about himself. If you're in a situation like a Montessori classroom, really the kids don't really know what everybody else is working on and who's smarter or who started earlier.
And don't care.
I'm not an expert in Montessori, but I grew up with a young man named Donovan Albanese, whose parents run Albanese Education, and they make Montessori materials out of Dallas, and they ship all over the world. And Julianne Albanese told me that when they started a school, it was essential that they would start with one student, and then each month they would introduce a new student, because they had to make sure that they maintained the school culture. And
that's the way a classroom will go. Yeah. I know someone who teaches Montessori, like real Montessori, and that's the way she's told me they do it. It's harder to introduce a new student. You have a certain routine going, and the teacher's got to give more time to that new student to teach them the ropes and what's going on and not disrupt the whole thing. And if you have too many starting at one time, too many kids, you just can't.
Right. So that's I don't know if that's a principle. It sounds like it's a principle of Montessori. So they actually do they do contemporary Montessori certifications. They actually have their own certification that they provide.
And maybe that person I know who does Montessori will be on the show in the future. I hope so. But
you can ask them about it.
Yeah.
But can you imagine, like, if you're a kid and you're coming in and there's 30 other kids in the class and you're starting off day one, and some kids are able to get it and you're not, you're going to feel kind of stupid. Mm-hmm. But if you start school a month after all of these other kids have already been here and you can't figure something out, well, you have no idea. There's no context to figure out where you are, right? And where they are doesn't really make a big difference because they had a head start.
Yeah.
Right? There's just all sorts of things that our current system does to put the average student and the average teacher and the average parent at a disadvantage to begin with. And we know better ways of going about it. But I think a big part of the problem is that we do think that money is going to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you could have twice as many teachers, right? You could have 12 to 1. But if you're not teaching mastery, right, you're not going to have the kind of results that you could if you just made sure that a kid learned something. So, like when Melanie, when you were talking about trying to get a kid to play something that they're not capable of playing, well, I'm sure Michael deals with this all the time. You get a kid who, instead of being able to learn something new, you have to start off by teaching the kid that he's not an idiot, right? Like, so you have to, instead of starting from scratch, you're starting way behind. So you get this, you've got this parent who's come, hey, I've got this kid, he can't do 8th grade math, and he's a sophomore in high school. He's broken, fix him. That's what, you have to do a lot of times in tutoring. And, turns out the kid's, average enough intelligence, there's no problem learning the skills. It's just you can't get him to do the work because he's convinced there's no way he can learn it. And you have to get over that. And that's where we're putting our teachers and our students and our parents, that's where we're starting in most education systems.
Yeah. I actually was going to say that I get a lot of transfer students from piano teachers, and these are kids who played for 2 years and can't read notes.
Yeah.
They can't figure out rhythm. They don't know what note it is by looking on the staff to find it on the piano unless I help them put their, I'm like, what were they being taught?
What were they doing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they were playing by ear. They get very good at just, and the teachers will help them by playing it first so they can hear how it's supposed. And I will not do that for a student. Not if I'm expecting them to learn it off the music, It'd be like reading the sentence to the child and saying, now read that. Well, of course they're going to read back what you just said. You know what I mean? I mean, they're that, a child who can't read yet, and you say, this sentence says the cat ran down the street. What are they going to read back to? The cat ran down the street, but that doesn't mean they're reading.
I had no idea that music had its whole language.
Correlate.
Corollary.
It's different. I mean, yes, there's a note system that has mathematical representation, like how long, duration. There's a whole system of where the note is placed on the staff versus where it goes on the instrument, where it's clarinet or violin. I mean, everybody has their note system, and it's amazing how many kids limp by. And you know what they're thinking when they walk in my studio? I know it. I've seen it for so many years. What's she going to teach me? I can't do this. I'm not capable. And when you said that part about first convincing them they're not an idiot, there's a whole psychology that has to go in to helping this child realize you can do this, but we have to do it this way so that you can flourish.
Can you imagine how much more work you'd get done if you didn't have to go through that process?
Well, the ones I start with from day one, I don't have to go through that.
You know exactly what it's like. Well, that's very interesting. There's a lot of high-functioning dyslexics in the world. In fact, I read that 8 out of 10 self-made millionaires are dyslexic, right? And when I hear stuff like that, it makes me think that what you're dealing with are people who are dyslexic to some extent.
Yeah.
Their brains work differently. So when they go to teach something to someone, they're going to teach how they learned, which, hey, let's do this by ear because that's what I do. I can read the notes and stuff, but that doesn't really help me because, it's just so much easier for me to play by ear. Because dyslexics, the way their brains work is, the human brain's amazing. It will find a way to figure out how to solve your problem. And if reading doesn't work for a dyslexic, right, they're going to have other talents and other abilities that most people just don't have, and they can't develop very easily. And it doesn't really translate very well. No, okay, I played it for you. Now you play it. Well, after 2 years of doing that, then that person.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, and really, what we're doing with the whole language is, really 15 to 20% of the population should be naturally dyslexic, but we've gotten to the point where about 40% reads like a dyslexic or more. They're memorizing words; they can't sound words out because they were never taught. And so it's almost as if, and I do think Horace Mann, I'm having a hard time finding the quote, but he has this quote where, like, phonics, teaching phonetics is like, wisps. It's like ethereal. It like doesn't make any sense. And I think it doesn't make any sense to him because it didn't make any sense to him. Horace Mann was a genius, and he could memorize enough words to be able to memorize them. And what do you mean you're hearing sounds within the word dog? It's just dog. Good. What are you talking about? That's wisps. That's nonsense. And I think we have a situation where we've got really smart dyslexics teaching people how to read, and of course they're not going to want to do phonics.
Kind of like having tone deaf people teach music or something.
Right. Well, then that's just it. I mean, you've got these people who are incredibly talented, but they can't use the systems that we've developed for passing on knowledge consistently. We've always been able to tell stories and pass down stories for generation to generation to generation. And once we learned how to write things down, our memories just aren't as good, right? Like if, we're well-educated people, if we're going to tell a story, we want to read it again first before we tell it to make sure we know it. But if you were to ask some tribal people a story, typically it doesn't change at all. Like they know it. When you ask those people to, teach their stories, they're not going to start by teaching you how to read. All right, they're just going to tell you the story. and they're not going to have any idea why you can't remember it after the first two, telling.
Yeah, they're just gonna think you're deficient and have learning disabilities and are like can't learn very well.
Reality is, it is a bit of a learning deficiency.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you were to go, and you might be able to keep up with the hunter-gatherers as far as the hunting is concerned there, Michael. But if I were to go out there and try and chase down an antelope or something, and they would certainly think there was something seriously wrong with me.
Yeah.
And they would be right. I should be in that kind of shape.
Yeah.
They'll have you weave baskets. It's okay. You'll find something.
Yeah. They'll send me in to weave baskets or tend the fire. Yeah. And I would be happy with that.
I have to make a plug for a super good book. It's called Fire Hunter. Have you read that one?
I have not.
Oh, Michael got us to the kids that, he teaches my kids science and everything. Anyway, so he had us read Fire Hunter. And you've mentioned a number of things along the conversation today that make me want to give a plug for this book because it's just so good. And we'll put it in the show notes at the end. But definitely it talks about how for a society then to work back in, prehistoric man, it would be where everybody had their own division of labor, their specialized task. And if you didn't do it, all of a sudden there's a void there. Well, how are we going to survive if someone's not making arrows or weaving baskets or, whatever it is. So, but it's a very good book. I highly encourage anyone listening to read it, pick it up. It's hard to find. It's out of print. So
since I don't have the hunter-gatherer memory, I will definitely check the show notes.
Yeah, it's okay. And I think there's a free PDF. Melanie, a free PDF online we can link to. Otherwise, because the book itself is, I think it was written in the 50s, but it's harder to find, and so on Amazon, if you get a copy, it's going to be like $60 or $100 or something like that. And
it's 50. I bought it.
It's more like it's so really good. I'd recommend it for anybody, any age.
So that's $10 each.
But yeah, it's more like a kid's book, maybe more like junior high school level.
Yeah.
But still, some kids' books are still awesome to read.
It's good. It's heroic. And it's very insightful. Really shows you if your mind if you're aware of what your environment has going on, you'll survive. But if you just tune out or, just coast, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be very hard.
And I think it makes some mistakes. Hold on. I think it makes some mistakes about animals. Like, I think it presents like some lions and stuff as like, all they want to do is attack people. And, oh my gosh, it's such a dangerous place. And I'm not sure to what extent it was really like that. Like a study was done recently, and it found that lions avoided areas where there was a human voice. They would majorly change their behavior to avoid it. Lions, bobcats, some other things. And then if you look at the scientific literature, instead of made up stories, read I forgot this one book I'll put in the show notes about lions. A lot of times when the guy tried to track down a report of someone who said they were attacked by a lion, he could never find any like solid source. Well, so-and-so was attacked by a lion, and you go talk to them. Well, who was it? Well, so-and-so, and it's just a story passed down that is just make-believe and never really happened. But some of that, sometimes
that's a teachable moment there too. Like
sometimes there are some attacks, but a lot of it it's like way, way overrated, misunderstood, and it can only happen because we're so ignorant about the way nature works.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're going to have very few sources for anything, especially fiction, where you're not going to have some stuff where you can disagree with the author on.
Yeah, everyone makes mistakes. I make mistakes. Do you make mistakes, Scott? Or are you perfect?
Nah,
Melanie, do you make mistakes?
I'm pretty close. But,
I make mistakes.
Yeah. Now, who doesn't? Well, I got in the habit early on of making mistakes as a teacher. You can't really afford it. You can't really avoid it too much when you're dyslexic. Like one thing I would do is I would say one word and then something else would come out of my hand on the board.
Oh yeah.
And the kids would get a big kick out of that. But you can't expect your students to learn anything if perfection is what's expected immediately. you have to make mistakes in order to learn.
Yeah.
And whenever I made a mistake, I pointed it out. Like I stopped teaching just as kids were getting their phones, and every once in a while somebody might find something that I said, a day or two later, or that was wrong, and then I'd take time out the next day to make sure each class knew that I had made a mistake and that Jenny had found out.
It's great. Yep. And, good.
So just because I'm an authority figure and I say something, I thought it was true. Like one time, because I had taken a class on the origination on English, the development of the English language. Right? We studied Old English and Middle English, and for some reason my memory had messed up, and I thought that English was majority French and minority German. Right? Well, it turns out it's actually majority German and minority French, which makes sense considering that the French came over, and they were ruling the locals, and most of our French words just have to do with things that the nobles would do. Like, for example, a cow, our word for cow comes from coup, C-U, right? Which is what it was in the field. But when somebody finally ate it, it was bouf, which becomes a beef, right? That's why we have two words for chicken and poultry and pig and pork, because the people working in the field didn't get to eat that stuff. And so once it got on somebody's plate, it became the French version. Anyway, I was talking to the kids about that, and they had learned in another class that it was, like 60% German and 40% French. I was like, oh my gosh, let me look that up. Oh, well, looks like I was wrong yesterday, guys.
About English? Actually, both are wrong, because it's not 60-40. There's the Latin.
What is it?
There's the original English. I don't remember the thing, but there's a Viking in it. It's like...
yeah. It's more complicated, but it's mainly German and French, and then the French is Latin, right? Latin, French comes from Latin.
Yeah.
It gets more complicated. Yeah. So, and then there's a lot of, because English has a broken grammatical structure that you can. I mean, for example, in Spanish, if you were to take a verb from another language, you'd have to add AR, IR, or ER at the end of it. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. You can't conjugate it, right? But in English, you can take any word from any other language and just insert it, and it makes sense, right? You don't have to change anything to it, right? And so it's a really convenient language as far as that's concerned.
Because
it is hard to learn.
I say to some students, capiche. I don't say capisciar or capichar, just capiche.
Right. And if there's a noun, it's pretty easy. For example, what do you think they call sushi in Spanish?
Sushi?
Don't know.
Sushi. Yeah, because it's a noun, you don't have to worry about it.
Oh.
But any kind of verb you're going to add, like for example, what do you do when you're writing somebody a message on your phone? They send you a text message, right? And you text them back. Well, in Spanish, typically most people have started to say textear.
Huh. Oh, yeah.
Right? So they're adding AR to the end of the word text. And they have to do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've had a lot of fun. Do you guys have any more questions for me?
It's been about an hour and a half. So we got more questions, but we can.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been an honor. I hope you guys got something out of it. I hope the audience got something.
Yeah.
I want to recommend everybody get on Patreon or PayPal and help these folks out. They have to put a lot of work into putting these podcasts together. It only took me like an hour and a half, but Michael and Melanie had to put the show notes together and check the audio. They're probably going to have to listen to this a couple times, and they're going to get really annoyed hearing my voice after a while. But
not at all.
I really appreciate it, and so I'm donating.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it takes dealing with the show notes. I'm doing it mostly because I know more about some of this stuff, kind of more specialized stuff sometimes. So we'll have to have go for 2 months or something where it's nothing but art, so I can just kick back and relax and lie under the sun and let Melanie do all the work for a change, because it takes like hell, like, you know, the preparation, never mind that, and then the podcast, and then getting show notes and everything together. It's like freaking 3 or 5 hours. It's like, it's a lot of work, a lot of time. Sometimes my eyes get all bloodshot. I get all tired looking at this damn computer screen and my damn phone screen. I need to like get the hell out of the.
Well, it's a good thing you've got the NewVnet to move into when that happens.
True. Yeah, that's a saving grace there. But yeah, thanks, Scott. But
thank you, Scott, and I hope you can find time to meet with us again for some more. I mean,
anything. I'm an open book. Anything you guys want to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So, more stuff.
Great talking to you.
More questions. Cool. All right. Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Bye. Bye.
So, folks, hope you enjoyed that discussion with an actual teacher, ex-teacher. See what he did, how he was successful, and why, and learn some things about what's going on in education that we need to, fix. We need to be self-critical, and then do whatever it takes to help out or get rid of some of the people who like the guy who fired Scott. When Scott does his research and his due diligence and knows what's right and is doing what helps his kids, and he's got a proven track record, and he gets fired because he's not bowing down and kissing the guy's feet as if the guy's some king that is to be obeyed mindlessly. Well, that guy needs to go, not people like Scott. Yeah. So one reason we're suffering in the culture, students are suffering, their children are suffering, the culture is because people like that. And, we need to be honest and self-critical and objective and do what we need to fix things. And like someone like that needs to improve their own self first. What the hell would have been the big deal if he starts using phonics anyway? How the hell would that hurt his position or affect him? So he's learning, he's doing something better. It's going to have his students will be more successful and so on and so forth. What the hell's the problem? It's unconscionable that he doesn't make a change and do something better like that. But right. That's something we need to, not necessarily just fight for it, but as I say, help teachers out, see if they need anything, convince them of good ideas, persuade them, give rational arguments, help them out, let them know that they can do things better. Hey, you're doing this really well. We like your conviction, but here's something you can do that's better. Give some support. Have some training sessions over the summer, if you want. Some people donate stuff. What about donating a free training session in grammar to the teachers or something? But and then a good point Scott made was how one issue is that some people talk about how some Japanese schools are doing better than American schools, but Scott made the good point that Montessori and homeschoolings do in some cases are doing even better. Not all homeschooling, but some. And some Montessori schools are in name only. They're not real Montessori. So when we look at the ones that are really good and really effective in doing rational education, looking at schools all around the world compared to them, they're just not passing muster. And I think more generally we need more better philosophic standards, epistemological standards of what's going on, how to judge what's being taught, how to judge what a teacher should do. More of that needs to come up in teacher training, assessing students. If, in my opinion, the fact that so many graduate from high school, never mind junior high school, not knowing what induction or deduction are, basic thought processes about how our mind works, that is intellectually criminal. That should not be happening. And as I say, I didn't know better before. A lot of teachers don't. They're doing their best. But, There are, of course, some philosophers and some influential teachers who are at fault, but not all of them. Not all the teachers. But some people are definitely at fault and definitely should be blamed, are reprehensible for some of this. But we should be having a situation where, heck, even like junior high school kids can tell you a little bit about induction and deduction, and then they can tell you more like after high school. Because those are basic thought processes that occur. Induction, how we form generalizations. Deduction, how we use them in life. How we bring a general case to a particular individual example. And as we talked about in other episodes, like with Scott, a different Scott Harris, people need to know what concretes they're talking about. And hence definition's important. Because the things you're talking about define and delimit the scope of what you're discussing and thinking about. And when people don't know the concretes like that, then to emphasize it and to kind of stress it, we can put it this way. Just for the sake of rhetoric, we can say if people don't know the concretes they're talking about, then they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Knowledge is of the world. It's not memorized stuff. So that's digging deeper and seeing what's going on in kind of where more Montessori and some good Montessori and good homeschools are going. And that's on a deeper level, more what Scott would be getting at. But any other words, Melanie?
No, that's great. It's a great way to end the show.
Cool.
A positive, this is what we could do.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's like,
Yeah.
Sometimes, we need to be critical, and sometimes, what we're doing is being passionate about things, not being attacking, And that's what's going on here. We need to realize this is pro-life, survival, something we got to embrace so we can thrive and be happy.
Yeah, like you said before, they're our kids. They're our future.
Yeah. True.
And there's their future. We need to help them get a good future.
Yeah.
Have it.
So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed it, folks, and remember, recommend the podcast to your friends and any parents and definitely teachers, school administrators, people who are influential. You got people out there wanting to help education or change it or have foundations or whatever, and send this to them so they can get some of the ideas in their organization. If they want, they can contact like Scott Harris, Scott McMickle, Melanie, or I. We could help out. A lot of people are figuring out, as we discussed in the previous episode 25, about problems with science education or education in general, a lack and a dearth of critical thinking in general, and having degrees in philosophy and having in history and all this that we got, and having studied the history of science and everything, we don't have the answer, but we have a lot of answers, and we have ideas that can help serve as a springboard for others and further developments and doing things better. Just as Copernicus came before and led, Copernicus led to Kepler, and Kepler and Galileo led to Newton, and so on. We need to build. But cool. So please support the show. Please support Rational Ideas, and thank you for listening. Any words, Melanie?
No, thanks everybody.
All right, y'all have a good day.
See you next time.